Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Coffee with Colin, the show that inspires you to live your best self life. It is Monday. It is Motivation Monday. Hope you guys are having a great beginning to your week. I have had a fantastic weekend myself. We are in the 5th week of my Inspire course. My Inspire course, if you haven't heard about it, is 6 weeks of goal setting, insight, paradigm shifting. It is so inspirational. And when you finish doing the Inspire course, you look at life from a completely different perspective, and all the limiting beliefs that may have been holding you back in going after what you truly care about in life get looked at from a different perspective. So when you come out of this 6 weeks, you are left into taking bold action. And that leads into doing our Inspire Summit, which we have coming up on May 23rd. And this is going to be 5 hours of motivational speakers, meditation, yoga, inspiration. We've got a little bit of everything for everyone in the Inspire Summit. If you haven't gotten your ticket yet, you're definitely going to want to pick one up. And in there, we've got pretty much everything for everyone. And I think you've been hearing me talk about what it means to be integrated as a human being. As someone who cares about health and wellness and fitness and reaching your highest potential, for me, it really is all about finding the best things out there in life that I can implement into my daily routine so that I'm able to stay as healthy as I possibly can, have as much energy as I can. I love to learn new things and new insights from thought leaders and speakers and doctors, and especially as someone who has battled cancer in my life twice. As a cancer survivor, I take my health very seriously. So this summit is all about sharing with you some of the best knowledge out there and insight for you to live your best life. So we have everything that will touch upon your emotional capacity, your physical wellness, your mental ability to be able to handle all the problems out there. And I know a lot of people out there are dealing with anxiety and stress. We deal with it on a daily basis. And this summit is going to be offering to you a lot of really great strategies and insight for you to be able to take these tools and implement them into your daily life so that you can go out there and truly live the life that you want to be living. There's a lot of things that hold us back in life from going after what we want to. And I've always been a proponent of finding ways to hack my way out of being stuck or having these limiting beliefs stop me from what I'm doing. There's no way I would have been able to get to where I was at in the biggest stages in the world and continue to work on the biggest stages in the world as an actor if I didn't contend with some of the limiting mindset beliefs that I had for myself. And as someone who has grown up from the Midwest and as someone who was an introvert, I have had to learn and adopt a lot of amazing strategies and insight that I've learned from a lot of people. And it's important that we look for information from different sources. If we're constantly getting our information from just one source or from a few selected sources, we could be missing the bigger picture and a lot of really great insight and knowledge out there. And that's why I'm excited to have my guest on here tonight, because my guest tonight is someone who has been practicing medicine for 38 years as a family practitioner. And he practices down in San Antonio, Texas. I was introduced to my next guest through a good friend of mine who I trust, and he has been helping her deal with her health and wellness issues. And she spoke very, very highly of my next guest. And so I wanted to talk to him and have him come on the show to share with us his insight and his knowledge about how to take the best care of yourself. And not only is he a family practitioner in the Western medical sense, but he's also been a practitioner of holistic medicine for the past 7 years. And I want to invite him on here because, you know, for most of us growing up here in America, we grew up in the mindset of that this is how we are supposed to be treated by doctors. This is the way it's done. And this is how it's been done for years. And sometimes we don't always, we're not always given the best information. Sometimes there's information that is put out there and there's an agenda behind it. And so it's really important for us to be able to seek out as many different sources as possible to find out the information that is out there. And then you are able to make the best decision for yourself, because there's no one right answer out there for everyone. There are different people are dealing with different health aspects about who they are. Not one diet fits one person. Not one health regimen fits one person. So it's important to, again, seek out and find the best information out there that fits you, because not one size fits all. It doesn't work that way. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest for tonight. His name is Dr. Frank Mueller, and he's going to be sharing with us his insight and strategies on how to take the best care of ourselves. And I've got some really great questions from my audience. And for those of you who would like to still ask some questions, feel free to shoot some of your questions here in the chat. But please, ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Dr. Frank Mueller. Dr. Frank Mueller, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Good to see you.
So glad to be here. And thank you, Kim, for getting us hooked up together.
Yes, exactly. So
she's an awesome lady.
She is. And how long have you been working with Kim and getting her her best self?
3 years, I think, something like that. She's a fascinating lady. You know, there's a lot of folks like her where standard stuff doesn't really work. You know, I have a lot of patients who you want to put them on an antibiotic and they say, nope, I'm allergic to that. I'm allergic to that. Even the usual stuff. You know, if a person is allergic to Benadryl, we know we have a little bit more of a problem. So those are my fun challenges for the day. And we get them every day. You know, we're finding out that more and more people are not doing as well with standard medicine these days. And I think a lot of it is probably because we have more toxins in our environment. You know, you always say, well, how about if I just do it the way my grandparents did it? But you can't eat the same way they do anymore. You know, they used to have farms and they would put holistic manure on the field. Well, now they put chemicals on it. Now they recycle trash and put it on the field, and then you eat it, and then you wonder, why am I not doing so well? You know, so there's a lot of things like that. So in my opinion, what's really become important is how to detoxify. And so we can talk more about that. But there's, you know, the beauty of it is it all goes back to some of the original stuff like exercise and sweating, good sleep. And I mean, the nutrition is incredibly important. And, you know, back to that one, I mean, do we need to be all organic? You know, that's a good question. And as it turns out, we probably need to be as organic as possible, because you don't know what's in all that fruits and vegetables. I mean, we tell you to eat fruits and vegetables, but, you know, it's hard to say what's in those. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the Environmental Working Group, EWG.org. Have you heard of it?
I haven't.
Okay, so if you go to that, and they have a thing called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. So that's a nice place. If you're going through the store, you could get an app on your phone and you can see, do I have to have an organic strawberry? The answer actually is yes, because all those little hairs on the strawberry collect all kinds of stuff. That's one of the dirtiest fruits out there, but you know how good it is for the brain. So you want to have strawberries and blueberries and those things that have the anthocyanins and things like that. They really help your brain function, but you got to kind of know which ones, you know, you don't want to contaminate it with a pesticide that may slow down your brain. We want to keep your brain going full speed. So there's a lot of information out there on a bunch of things like that.
And so you started out as just a Western medicine family practitioner. And, you know, myself, I have a degree in biology. I was planning on going to medical school. And
I read your book, and it's excellent, by the way. I encourage everybody to get that book. That is very inspirational. And I mean, it was captivating. I think you did an excellent job.
Thank you very much. And so I'm sure you read in there that I was planning on going to medical school. And before I was planning on doing that, I was actually planning on going to, there was a school in San Diego called the Pacific School of Oriental Medicine, because I got introduced to Eastern philosophies of medicine at the University of Iowa. And it seemed to make a lot of sense to me, because it was more so dealing with the root of the problem instead of the symptoms. And I think a lot of Western medicine, you know, just so easily goes right towards treating the symptoms instead of getting at the root of the problem. And so I would imagine as a holistic doctor now that you've been practicing that for 7 years, Can you tell us what made you transition into wanting to incorporate more of these holistic modalities into your practice?
So my uncle, Bill Mueller, is a dentist, and he was using ozone on my teeth. And, I was just going in for a teeth cleaning, and he'd put a little boot over my tooth and blow a little ozone on there. I said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "It makes the tooth much stronger. You should learn about this. The rest of the world is using ozone." I said, "Well, I didn't learn about it in medical school. It must not be any good." He says, "You're going to find out that is not correct." So this went on for 2 years. And finally he says, "All right, I know you like Vegas." I said, "Yeah." He says, "All right, I already booked you." And I said, "What are we going to?" He said, "The first International Association meeting of ozone in healthcare and dentistry. And you got to go to 1 hour. And if you don't like it, you can go gamble, do whatever else you want. But I think you need to hear what's going on." So I said, "Okay, fine." So that first hour totally blew me away. It was, and we had people from all over the world, and I had never heard of this. It's like, hey, I've been in practice at that time for what, 20 years, I guess. And I hadn't even heard, ozone was ozone action alert day. You didn't want to breathe the ozone,
Mm-hmm.
But here you're using activated oxygen to ramp up your body's immune system. It's healing. It acts very much like exercise does. And you know how important that is. So, and the part of the reason exercise is important is because it sheds electrons. The actin and the myosin fibers, when you move your arms, they shed electrons, and that helps to drive your Krebs cycle, which is what generates ATP, which is a unit of energy that we need for everything to happen. So as it turns out, what happens if you can't exercise? And it turns out that ozone, if what we do is a blood ozone therapy. And so we put an IV in, and we drain your blood into a bag of saline, and then it's mostly oxygen, actually. It's only 3% ozone, 97% oxygen, and we bubble it into your blood, and it attaches to the double bonds in your plasma. So now you have activated blood, basically, and we put it right back in. And that drives your healing. It's what they call a hormetic stress. Ozone is a mild stress. It's just enough to stimulate your body to get stronger and better. Very much like working out with weights. If you work out, people always say, well, you tear down a few muscles and you build them back stronger, or you make more lactic acid and you build it back stronger. There's a lot of things like that. Athletes will go into these cylinders with liquid nitrogen, and they kind of freeze their bodies down. It's a stress, but then the body comes back stronger. It's pretty interesting how that, you could look at that psychologically too. All of the stressors in your life have made you stronger as well, or they kill you,
Yeah. So there's eustress, which is that the good stress or the bad stress? There's certain stressors that, like lifting weights, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
actually encourage your body to get stronger. And much like an ice cold plunge pool, which there was a place in New York City, this Turkish bathhouse that I used to love to go to, where they had this ice cold plunge pool. And you go from super hot into this ice cold plunge pool, you walk out of there and you feel like your skin is glowing. You feel like just invigorated. And from everything that I've learned and have read about, it's all about increasing blood flow, because the more blood flow that you can get through your body, the faster, the more nutrients are going to be directed towards the areas of your body to heal faster. So are you saying the ozone actually helps stimulate blood flow throughout your body to...
Well, it does more than that. So it actually decreases inflammation, even though it's an oxidant. This is a weird thing. You hear about oxidants being bad, and we take antioxidants, but you need some oxidative stress or you will not live. So you need to constantly be a little challenged with the environment, and then your body responds positively after that. One of the better stressors, for example, is intermittent fasting. I think your guest last week was talking about his diet. That was Cameron, right?
Yeah.
And I was impressed. That guy is doing it right. He's got a good diet, and he exercises and does intermittent fasting. So that's another component. Why would intermittent fasting work? It's kind of one of the most primitive things. If you're in the caveman, and there's no food, your body has to make the best version of itself to go out and get the next animal, or you're going to be dead. And that will be the end of the species. So the way the body works is it looks at itself and says, hey, we've got some cells in here that are not working effectively. We need to clean them out. So there's autophagy, self-eating. So your body finds those cells, actually tears them down, uses the raw materials, dumps out a bunch of stem cells, and uses them to rebuild you into the best version you can be so you can survive and the species can survive. And we can do that, you know, several times a year. There's actually a guy by the name of Walter Longo, Longo, and he's out in California, and he got a lot of NIH grant money to study longevity. And so he has these things called a Prolon diet, Prolon. And it's about a $240 box of food, 5 days of food. It doesn't look like much because it's mostly soups and stuff like that. What they found was if a person would fast for 5 days on just a bone broth diet, by the second day, they usually switched from burning carbohydrates into burning fats, which is a better fuel for your body. And then on the third day, they started this autophagy thing where they get rid of their non-functioning or poorly functioning cells. And then on the fourth and the fifth day, they dumped out a lot of stem cells. The problem was very few people actually stuck with the diet that long. It's hard, you know, you may get hungry, you may get jittery, different things like that. So he's saying, how can we mimic that fasting mimicking diet and get the same benefit and maybe eat 4 times a day? How can we hack the body? How can we trick the body? So they came out, they looked at a bunch of different foods. And so that's what they have in this packet. So what I learned from that, like every morning you get like a little breakfast bar. It has like nuts combined with a little bit of honey, and that's about it. So, but you eat 4 times a day. You have a lot of soups, teas. Turns out if you're hungry and you want to stay on a diet, if you put soup or tea in your stomach, give it about 10 minutes, you'll be surprised. There's a lot in there. It's much better than just plain water, and then you won't be as hungry. But the other cool part with that diet is by the time you click into fat burning, and you probably experience this, you're not hungry anymore. You make the ketones, and the ketones suppress your hunger. So I think what they are suggesting is that maybe if we did that 3 times a year, we might not have cancer. And that is a bold proclamation that they're trying to figure out if that will be true, because cancer cells are not as adaptable. Our cells are incredible. We can burn carbohydrates, we can burn fats, we can endure these stressors, but the cancer cell gets so focused into just growing and being its own little guy and at all cost. And so if we stress it a little bit, it gets weak. And so then your natural killer cells and then things can kind of knock it out. So it's a fascinating diet, and everybody ought to probably try it sometime. Like I say, if you go to www.prolon, well, it's Prolon Diet. I don't know what it is. Something like that. Prolon, yeah, and you'll find it. But that's a cool thing. If you're stuck, if some of your listeners may be stuck, they can't seem to get past a spot with weight loss. This is a neat way to do it, and it's already been investigated with your own tax dollars, so you paid for it yourself already. And it has a lot of science behind it, and you could look it up. He has a book called The Longevity Diet if you wanted to study that more too.
Okay. All right. And so for most people who just have been grown up drinking milk and eating dairy and meat, and I grew up eating cold cuts and processed meats and bacon and all that stuff. And I loved it. It's like it's
Lucky Charms.
Lucky Charms. Yes.
That.
So, which I don't eat anymore.
Good for you. I'm proud of you.
So there was a documentary that I watched called Game Changers. And what I saw was that a lot of the top high performance athletes in the world are actually vegetarian and vegan. And as a marathon runner and a triathlete, I'm always looking for ways to increase my performance. And as a marathon runner, I have, the term hit the wall. I've hit the wall a couple of times. The marathon is 26.2 miles. And there's a couple of marathons where at like mile 23, literally hit the wall where my muscles cramped up. And it felt like my legs were 400 pounds. And like what you were talking about with training your body to burn fats instead of carbohydrates, because a lot of our diets are so high in sugar that we've trained our bodies to be burning the glucose and all the carbohydrates that we eat, so that we have these crashes in mood and energy. So for most people out there who would come to you, Dr. Mueller, and who are just looking for ways to increase their energy, sleep better, reduce inflammation, reduce their chances of getting diseases such as cancer, what would be like your protocol that you would start someone on if they came to see you?
Well, very much like what you said, everybody is so different, and you don't want to blow them away with everything at one time, or it's like, I don't think I can do that. So we got to have little steps. I think the diet in this country is probably the main thing to start with. And, you know, if I was president, I would commission the NIH to have an ad every time you see a food ad on TV, then have a public service announcement of what we really ought to be eating. But they don't. They used to do that when I was growing up. You'd see some kind of public service announcement, but we don't get it anymore because everything's kind of run by the food industry, the drug industry. I mean, if you ever watch the evening news, you see all those drugs for all the autoimmune diseases. Well, why do we have them? It's because we're eating inflammatory foods. So if we could, you know, actually, so the rheumatologist in town that I borrowed some of her diet history from, she says if you have inflammation, you should go on an anti-inflammatory diet. So that's no dairy, no sugar, and no gluten, and do that for about a month and see 4 to 6 weeks. And so people say, well, what will I eat? So you have vegetables, and you have you can have a fruit in the morning. So why do we not want a fruit in the evening? If you have sugar on your brain at night, it can't clean itself out. So there's another guy by the name of Dr. Bredesen. Have you heard him? He does The End of Alzheimer's. I'll show you his book. I brought a lot of books for show and tell today.
Okay, great.
Let's see, where's that? The End of Alzheimer's. This guy is pretty impressive book because you always hear that Alzheimer's, once you get it, that's it. He's reversed it. And how did he do it? It's a complicated thing. The brain is complex. You got about 30 different things that you need to try to do. But the first ones are lifestyle. So, you know, exercise, get some good sleep. And if you can't get good sleep, figure out what it is. Is it sleep apnea? Maybe you need a supplement, maybe some melatonin or something. The exercise, we want to exercise and not tear your body down. Mm-hmm. So he's really into using, well, I mentioned that earlier before we went on the air that there's this thing called KAATSU, KAATSU. Let's see, there it is. These are blood flow restriction bands. So if we have an aging country, you can't just send people out to the gym and say, okay, go exercise. And most of them they're determined and they overdo it. Then they're back here and they have tendonitis and they can't do anything for 3 months. Now we've kind of lost our momentum. So this guy, Dr. Sato in Japan, like 40 years ago, came up, if you put these things on and they're connected to like a little computer box, there it is. And these little hoses over there, wherever that is, there it is. Okay. So anyway, it's basically you restrict the venous return. So you don't want to cut off your arterial flow or you're going to have a black hand. We do need to keep the circulation going. But if you just put a restriction band on there, and then you can use very light weights. So you can use maybe 5-10 pound dumbbell weights. You can even use, just your water bottle. And you can get a good workout in 15 minutes or so. They actually tested it on 400-pound people in LA. And they said, okay, we've got an exercise program for you. And they said, well, wait, we can't even get off the couch. All we can do is use our remote. So they said, fine, we'll put the armbands on. You use your remote. And they all lost weight because it increases the metabolic burn in your arms when you don't have as much oxygen in there. But it also releases chemicals that are very positive. You get more growth hormone release from your brain, and you produce brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, that helps you to grow new neurons and stay smart. That's what he wanted. So that's a guy with Alzheimer's. That's a piece of staying good, is keeping your brain really, really sharp.
All natural, just with these bands.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you can actually get less expensive bands. So this one costs about $1,000 because it's got a little computerized air compressor on your hip. And Navy SEALs use it, and they've tested on a lot of people. So there's a lot of science behind it, and it's very safe. A little bit less safe, but much cheaper, like $40, is BFR bands. You can buy them on Amazon. They're just a tourniquet, and you put them on, and you got to be sure that you can still fit one finger under there so that you got a little bit of blood flow. And obviously, if it doesn't feel right, take the thing off. But and then just you can do your regular activities. You can just do push-ups if you want. That's why the SEALs take them. I mean, they put them in their bag, and then no matter where they are, they can put on these things and just do calisthenics and get a tremendous workout. It's impressive. You build bulk quick if you want it, but you don't necessarily. For the women who don't want to be bulked up, it's all about keeping your brain sharp and your energy sharp, and you'll see a big improvement. Pretty impressive.
Awesome. And as far as diet goes, what are some foods that are in our normal American diet that we should absolutely avoid? And what are some of the foods that we should absolutely be eating? And what are some foods that we think are maybe healthy and they're actually not?
Okay, so absolute. That is difficult because no human is that good. So cut yourself some slack. And if you get 90%, that's pretty good. Your body is really amazing at handling your less than perfection, so you can still work it out. I mean, if one of the main things is fried foods. I have a patient who came from Russia. This was an amazing thing. You learn so much from people. And I said, this is great. What is the difference in healthcare in Russia versus here? And she says, oh my gosh, y'all are all eating fried food. And I'm thinking, well, yeah. And she says, it's destroying your mitochondria. And I thought, wow, this lady knows what she's talking about. So the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And, yes, fried foods, that's a fat. But you have good fats and then fats that aren't so good. So as it turns out, the best fats are like nuts and seeds, avocado, olives, olive oil. Those are some of your best things. And so, probably every day you should probably have a salad with some olive oil on it, or get some olive oil in some way. I just happen to have a bottle right here from our Texas Hill Country olive. This is up in Dripping Springs, right south of Austin. I went to visit the guy, and you have these people in your neighborhood. They know a lot about health. I said, what is special about your place? He says, do you know all the benefits of olive oil? And I said, no. Tell me what's going on. And he says, this is the reason the Mediterranean diet works. And it's the polyphenols. And he says, the problem is Americans, they're so used to having watered down olive oil, and it's diluted with other oils, and it's not as good. And it tastes very smooth, but a true olive oil, and you maybe tried this, if you drink it, it has a little bit of a bite on the back of your throat. And those are the polyphenols. And that's what does the magic of the Mediterranean diet, actually. I have a article here on the benefits of olive oil. Well, I can't find it. Okay. Anyway, I'll tell you about it. It lowers blood pressure. It lowers heart risk. It improves diabetes. Let's see. There was another one. Oh, yeah. Rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, they did all these studies. I think we ought to be announcing this to the entire U.S. population and say, hey, we've got a food here that works so much better than a lot of drugs, and it's relatively inexpensive, but we don't ever hear it. That's the problem.
And what about milk and dairy? We see all the ads for, the milk mustaches. And so we see all these celebrities with the milk mustaches and drink milk. And then you hear stories about milk is one of the worst things for your body because it causes inflammation. What's your take on all that? On the
your best milk is breast milk. Breast milk is the perfect food. But after we're weaned, we should not be drinking milk, actually, is what they found. Very many people are intolerant to it. It actually contributes to a leaky gut. So leaky gut, you have this protein, or I don't know if it's protein or what it is, but zonulin. It's kind of like the glue that holds your gut together. And there are a lot of substances that kind of weaken that gut, that lining, and then the digested food parts get down into the area around your gut, which happens to have some of the biggest concentration of lymphatic material, your lymphocytes and everything, your inflammatory cells, because it's always being bombarded. Well, now we're really bombarding it. And the problem is, if you get gut inflammation, there is a definite gut-brain connection. So if you have inflammation in your gut, you will probably be inflamed in your head, and it'll be very difficult to not be anxious or depressed, and you may not sleep well. I mean, it's just incredible. There was another book I was going to show you, and I think you've heard of it, Grain Brain. There it is. Dr. Perlmutter. So he's a neurologist in Florida. He's retired now, but this was a big book about 10 years ago. He had some interesting stories in there. You know, he would get the more difficult cases, people with schizophrenia and difficult to control children, and he would put them on a grain-free diet, very much like we talked about. No milk, no dairy, no grains. And their body, he'd give them 6 weeks. He wouldn't even put them on a medicine. Come back in 6 weeks, follow this diet. And at least half of them, that took care of the problem, because the gut was inflamed and it was inflaming the brain. It's pretty awesome. So food is super, super important. So back to what should you eat? I mean, for breakfast, should you have a bowl of cereal? Well, occasionally it's okay, but most of the time, no. And that's, you know, that's totally counter to the food department or whatever. But anyway, you know, you ought to, I mean, actually regular foods, true natural foods, foods that don't have any special ingredients. I mean, an egg.
What about eggs? Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's a perfect food, actually. You don't want to have too many. You know, do you need to have a 3-egg omelet every day? No. In fact, as it turns out, the good amount of protein is about the size of your palm of your hand, probably twice a day. So that's like a 4-ounce steak, maybe 6 ounce, and maybe 1, maybe 2 eggs. That's it. We eat a lot more protein in this country, and what happens? It gets turned into carbohydrate. A protein is a carbohydrate with an amino group stuck on it. So you just, if you have more than you need, you chop it off, and your body all of a sudden, you know, you thought you were doing the right thing, and now you're wondering, why am I putting on weight? So one other point: why do you put on weight? Because carbohydrates cause a release of insulin, and insulin comes out when you think you have more food than you need, and it stores it. So that's kind of the easiest part of it. So really, we're mostly overeating. So I thought it was interesting. Back to Dr. Bredesen and the brain thing. He's got on his website is called Apollo something. Anyway, but if you look up Bredesen, you'll find it. But his food pyramid will never be advertised on TV, because the bottom of it, you know, the top, it says, you know, you get a little dark chocolate, and what do you get? Blueberries and strawberries. And then the next section is your protein, and you get a little bit of salmon, and you get an egg, you know. But the very bottom, the biggest thing is not eating on the food pyramid. It's fasting. And that's the best thing for your brain, actually, is what it turns out. It's really fascinating. So I think we totally missed the boat on nutrition. I mean, how much nutrition did I get in medical school? 4 hours, maybe? You know, it should have been a whole year at least.
Yeah, it's crazy, because I've just had high cholesterol pretty much my whole life. I think it's hereditary, genetic. And when I went to go get my cholesterol test, this was a few years ago, my doctor was older, and, you know, it seemed like maybe he just wasn't, you know, up to date with like the newer philosophies of diet and exercise and that sort of thing. Because when I went in, got the blood test, I got a phone call a couple days later from him, and it was a voicemail saying, "Colin, you tested positive for higher levels of cholesterol. I am calling in a prescription for Lipitor. You can pick it up at your pharmacy." There was no discussion about what the side effects were, what, you know, maybe the foods that I could be eating that would naturally lower it. And I went on this thing for like a week, horrible headaches, muscle cramps. And then I started doing some more research on it, and I went off it. And that's why, one of the reasons why I gave up eating meat, because I want to try to do this naturally and not have to have these chemicals in my body. Because I've also heard it also can affect the myelin sheath on your neurons, which prevent your nerve cells from communicating with each other. So you get this brain fog. And so it can have all sorts of side effects that I was like, you know what, this is crazy. I mean, there's got to be a better way to take better care of ourselves.
So actually, like the olive oil works like a statin drug, like Lipitor. And it has been proven it's an HMG-CoA reductase inhibitor, just like the other one. And yet it's a natural food with all the other benefits. So, not everybody likes to take a swig of olive oil twice a day. But that's if you did a tablespoon twice a day for maintenance and 2 tablespoons twice a day if you have a lipid problem, that has been proven to work extremely well. And it helps to release nitric oxide. Are you familiar with that one? So nitric oxide, okay, there's a lot of things that release nitric oxide.
That's what's in Viagra.
It is. So why does that work? It's a vasodilator. And just like you mentioned, we got to get blood flow everywhere. So especially to our brains, to our muscles. Exactly. Yeah.
And is it the omega-3s that are in olive oil that are
it's called polyphenols. Polyphenols.
Okay.
I mean, you're right. Actually, it's omega-6s are more in the plant oils. So they were trying to figure, well, why is that helpful in olive oil? Because we always hear maybe omega-3s are better. In this country, we got a lot more omega-6s versus omega-3s. That's why the fish oil has omega-3s in there. So, but it's the polyphenols that really do the magic. And that's only like 2% of the olive oil. So most of the oil, I mean, it is a good fat, and you can use it to burn. It's a good fuel for your brain and stuff like that. So,
and can you tell us a little bit more about what the keto diet is, and is that a healthy diet to be doing?
A lot of controversy on that. I think if you talk to most of the functional medicine doctors, they are in favor of a keto diet for the most part. Now, no matter what diet you go on, you need to go off and on it. So you want to keep flexibility. If you do anything the same way over and over again, your body's going to figure a way around it and maybe not get the same benefit. I mean, we are designed to eat lots of stuff and do lots of stuff. So you need to stay very flexible. Agile artist. So I wanted to show you are you familiar with Dr. Hyman, Mark Hyman? So
yes.
So that guy has written a lot of good diets, and I have 2 of his books here that I think are really fabulous. His most recent one is called The Pegan Diet. And it's like, well, where did that come from? So he was talking with some friends, and one was paleo and the other was vegan. And he thought, well, you both have good comments, and good ideas, but he didn't want to call it a pagan diet. So he called it a Pegan Diet.
Okay. And the keto diet is limiting carbohydrates, right?
The keto diet. So like we talked about when you fast, the easiest thing for your body to digest is carbohydrates. That's your fast fuel. Like when you're the runner. So, would you like carb load before a run?
I used to, but again, I've discovered that I want to be training my body to be burning fats so that I don't have that crash.
Hit the wall, right. So if you're a sprinter, that's important to have that burst. And, you can store a fair amount of carbohydrates in your liver and in your muscles, but you'll burn through them with a marathon. So the keto diet is eating foods that tend to keep you burning more fat rather, and not making it's low carb, basically, is what it really is. Okay. So, you need a little bit of carbohydrate, but the best way to get it is in a vegetable. So the vegetables are carbohydrates, but they're bound in with a lot of pectin, fiber, stuff like that. And inside of all of that is all kinds of micronutrients. And that's why they're so important. So what I always tell everybody, if you don't really know what to eat, think of a chef salad. That's pretty easy. So what's in it? You got a bunch of green leafy vegetables and all kinds of colors of stuff. Peppers and of all different colors. What we have, tomatoes. Now, tomatoes, some people don't do well with nightshades. So nightshade plants, the little plant has looks like a nightshade, and there's a tomato hanging under it. So like eggplant and tomatoes. And Dr. Stephen Gundry wrote a book about lectins. So lectins, this is all getting complicated, but anyway, just lectins, some people don't do well with. And so different lectins, that includes gluten and all the other things. But anyway, if you tolerate, you'll know if you don't tolerate a tomato, eat one and see what happens. If it shoots right through you, or if you don't feel well, I mean, you really have to listen to your body. That's the easiest part. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so in this chef salad, you got all the green leafy vegetables. You can throw in some few fruits, a slice of strawberry or whatever you want in there, kiwi fruit. But then what else do we have? So we have some kind of a protein. If you are not vegan, you could put, slices of, if you have meat, I would suggest that it is organic grass-fed beef if you're going to have beef, or free-range chicken. So why do you care about the chicken? You know, in these high, where they make a lot of chickens, the chickens they're kind of tortured. You know, they cut the beaks off and they're in a little tight little cage, and their whole life is stressed. And then you eat the meat and you think you're not going to get a little stressed from that. I mean, you know, you have to kind of see where the animal came from.
Yeah.
So, and with a grass-fed animal, he's just out there and he's eating the vegetables, and you actually get the benefit of the vegetables on that. So anyway, so chicken, fish would be the ideal. You know, what your best protein, if you're going to eat protein, is probably wild-caught salmon, or the smash fish, they call them. S is salmon, M is mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. And the reason is, if they're smaller fish, they don't have a lot of mercury in them. Mercury is another toxin that can slow down your mitochondria, so you don't make as much energy again. We'll get to that in a minute. So let's see, we got maybe a little bit. You could put cheese, seems to be okay. It seems like fermented things that have been acted on bacteria by bacteria don't seem to bother us as much.
Oh, thank God. If you told me to get rid of my cheese, I'd like turn you off right now.
So, and what else gets fermented? Wine. Oh, good. So we can have wine and cheese. That's good.
Yay.
But some of the other things that really help the gut is like, you know, sauerkraut and kimchi, some of those things, but that's not going in your chef's salad. So let's see, what else do we have? If you have avocado, slice some avocado, some nuts, some seeds, and then a little balsamic and extra virgin olive oil. I didn't mention the importance of extra virgin olive oil. It really matters what kind of olive oil you get. So make sure that it says extra virgin and organic if you can. And
what is extra virgin olive oil?
So from my friend up there in Dripping Springs, you know, that means that the olives never touch the ground, and they are harvested and smashed into the oil within like 24 hours of removing them from the tree. So there's a big process, and that way there's no extra oxidation. We talked about good and bad oxidation. In this case, you do not want your olive oil to lose its potency. And so they got to do it a certain way to put that label on there. You know, there was an expose, 60 Minutes, probably, 12 years ago, about how the mafia was contaminating from Italy, was contaminating their olive oils because it's such a big profit maker. So they would put just corn oil and different things like that. We couldn't tell the difference, you know. So that's where some of these folks wanted to start emphasizing the importance of extra virgin olive oil, because that's the one that has the magic in it. So that's a good meal. I mean, that, you know, how many meals should you have a day? That's another good point. You know, do we really need 3 meals? Well, how many do you have?
I like to graze. So generally I'll have a little granola or oatmeal with blueberries or blackberries in the morning. And then I always have some dark chocolate kind of laying around somewhere. So I'll have a little bit of dark chocolate.
Good.
I have to have coffee in the morning. And one of our viewers was asking, Shannon Murray was asking, is coffee healthy for us? How much is healthy for us? And is that something that you would recommend or advise against? What's your view on coffee?
So I used to not be a coffee drinker, but I am now, partly because of Dave Asprey's book. You know, he's the guy who came up with Headstrong, and this is the guy who had the Bulletproof Coffee.
Yep.
So, and if you read through his story, have you read his book? He was ill with mold toxicity and a lot of different things. He had to come through similar challenges. Yours were a little different, but he found out that the coffee, some of the coffee beans have mold on them, you know, because they're harvested in South America. They go into just underneath a big tarp or whatever. And so some people are very sensitive to those molds on the coffee bean. I don't think I am, but anyway, so he made a whole business out of having super.
And how do you know which coffee doesn't have mold and which does have mold?
I don't know that answer. So he just said buy his, you know, but anyway.
Okay.
But the other key was, how do you ramp up your coffee and get a little bit more out of it? And so he puts medium chain triglyceride oil, which is another good fat. It's kind of like coconut oil.
MCT oil.
MCT oil.
Yeah, I've got some bulletproof MCT oil in my kitchen. Yep.
Can you tell the difference when you have it?
You know,
Not really, huh?
yeah, not really. I mean, it's
I'll
supposed
tell
to help
you.
with cognitive function, right?
Yeah. So, but fortunately, you don't have too much problem with that. So, in my patients who have mild cognitive impairment, if
Yeah.
we, it's so the challenge is by the time they have that, if I tell them, here's what you got to try to eat. Well, these people don't want to change their habits of eating, but most of them are drinking coffee. And I said, okay, all we're going to do is either put grass-fed butter in your coffee. They freak out over that one. I said, just stir it around. You won't even know it's in there. Or the MCT oil. And I can get them to do that. And they are remarkably better in about 6 weeks, just
Wow.
because their brain has a different fuel. It's pretty awesome. So,
Yeah.
so that part I think is, I think coffee is good, but so we're also doing food inflammatory panels in the office, and it's surprising. Some people say it says that their coffee is inflammatory for them. So you just got to try it at that point and see, do you feel better or worse? Drink some coffee, watch yourself for the next 2 days. How'd you do? That sort of thing. And the other one I have in here is green tea. Do you ever drink that?
I do.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah. If you really look it up, I mean, it's got anti-cancer. There's just so much about longevity with green tea. And some of those things, a lot of these things kind of come to a common denominator of increasing AMPK. I don't remember what that stands for, but it drives your production of energy again. And the counter of it, the ones that are inflammatory are making, let's see, NFKB, nuclear factor kappa B. Anyway, that's an inflammatory one. So anyway, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to know all the names of them, but they have actually figured out the science of all these to see how does all this stuff all come back together. So putting a little bit of it together, what does exercise do? It increases AMPK. So does ozone, by the way. So does good foods. So again, we didn't talk about the cruciferous vegetables yet. So those are like cauliflower, broccoli, kale, asparagus. And what those do is they help to drive the production of this other thing called glutathione. So glutathione is a really important chemical that helps you to detoxify. Again, just by being out today, you might have been exposed to bisphenol A. It's the slippery stuff on the back of your gas receipt. They did a neat study of waitresses who were, back when before everybody was, now most people do it online, but I mean, not on their phone, but when they were tearing off the receipt, at the end of the day, the waitresses had a higher level of bisphenol A in their bloodstream just from tearing off that little receipt. And it's the slippery stuff on the back of the little paper. In fact, in Europe, they ban it. How come we don't? It's all economic, I wish we could really listen to the rest of the world, because the rest of the world has a lot of useful information for us. But anyway, so what do? You just have to detoxify it, and your glutathione helps you to do that. So that's why your mom told you to take your, broccoli, cauliflower, all that stuff. It really is important. And I don't remember, there's some of those that have to be organic and some don't. And I think actually most of those don't have to be, surprisingly. So again, that was from ewg.org. And that's where you can find the foods that need to be organic and those that you can have regular. Yeah.
Okay. And what about soy? I mean, for a while, like 10 years ago, it was like, this is super healthy. And now people are saying because it mimics estrogen, it's not the best. What's your thoughts on soy?
I don't know as much about it, but I have heard the same things that you have, that it may mimic estrogen in some people. And for me, I would rather have a little less estrogen. So I think there are better choices. Around here, I mean, they always say to try to eat local, things that are produced in your area or from where your progeny came from. I'm more from Germany, so I guess I'm supposed to be eating more sauerkraut and things like that. Haven't really gotten into it all. I'm drinking some beer every now and then. By the way, what about alcohol? That's a good point.
Yes.
So beer is delicious, but it'll really pack the pounds on you in a hurry. So if you want to, we ought to have smaller bottles maybe, so we can taste it, savor it, but don't drink a whole 6-pack. And wine, if you look across the board, red wine is supposed to be the healthiest, but there are some studies that show that even one glass of wine for women can increase the risk of breast cancer. Isn't that odd? And that's kind of sad. I don't know what it does for men, but nobody ought to be having more than 2 glasses a day of wine. And spirits, it's still the same thing. No more than 1 or 2 ounces of hard liquor. And if you don't do well with wine, the more distilled spirits are the best. Gin, vodka, stuff like that. Yeah.
And what about coconut oil?
Coconut oil? It's good.
Good for you. It is high in saturated fats. So people with high cholesterol, I've been told to avoid it, but what's your thoughts on coconut oil? So
in general, most people do fine with that, but your best bet would be to try it for a couple of weeks and go get your blood drawn and see what it did. Okay. Because everybody responds a little bit differently to it. So it's really hard to make blanket statements on a lot of that. I really felt my mom's brother, I guess that's my uncle. He died at 86 with diabetes. I didn't even know he had it. But he was a healthy guy. He always was careful with what he ate and all this stuff. And so actually about 2 years ago, I came up with pre-diabetes. I thought, where'd this come from? I thought I was always going to be healthy. My grandfather on the other side lived to be 100, and I'm planning on going to 100, So, but sure enough, I had pre-diabetes. And so and I also had a high triglyceride, not so much a high cholesterol. So I thought I'd do it all with diet, just like you were describing. And I could do a lot with it, and I've gotten a lot better. I don't have the pre-diabetes anymore. My body composition totally changed. I was starting to get belly fat. And so that's something. Do you use a body composition scale? Are you familiar with it? The ones at the gym? I just have a regular scale. So they have these ones, and they're fairly inexpensive now. You just get on it, and I don't know how it works, sends electrical current through your feet, although you don't feel it. And you come up with what percentage of fat you have. And you can kind of gauge, you want to see, because sometimes people get really distressed. They say, I didn't lose a single pound. And when we do the body composition on them, it's like, well, wait, you don't have as much fat and now you're more muscle. This is much, much better for you. So it's a better way to kind of look at things. But at any rate, so my body composition was changing. I was always the one who had the cake first and then the rest of my meal, because life is short, right? But I was making it too short is what it turned out. So now I always want to have a little bit of dessert, but I'll have like just a small slice or just a bite. I want to savor it. I'm really back to just getting the essence of those things and then focus on the rest of it. Food is fuel and nutrition for my brain and stuff. I got to be sharp during the day. Yeah. Yep. And what are your thoughts on prebiotics and probiotics? Very important. So again, the gut is super important. There was a interesting story. I'll have to see if I can get that lady on. There's a vet up in somewhere in the Northeast, and she had dogs that were angry. And she thought, I've heard that if we change the gut biome, they could be better. So she fed this dog some poop from her animals, which had been totally no insecticide. They were always fed grass-fed beef and stuff. And in 2 days, this angry dog was as nice as her dog by changing the gut biome. Now, so that's where everybody said, hey, of course, it doesn't sound too good to be eating a capsule of poop. But then they started to do maybe, you've heard of doing the gut biome transplants. So if a person has messed up their gut with antibiotics, the U.S. was so slow to adopt this. Over in Europe, somebody said, well, the patient's dying. Why don't we put some good bacteria back in? So they did a colonoscopy and shot it back up there, and they lived. Well, 5-7 years later, the FDA said, okay, we can do it. But the problem was then some people started doing it out in the community, and you got to be careful who the donor is, because you could, because of the gut-brain connection, you don't really know. We don't know all the aspects of it. I know one of my friends who is a Democrat, she says, I don't want any poop from a Republican. But anyway, but it worked for the animals, but they kind of put a lid on it for the humans because somebody up in the Northeast got hepatitis from it. So if you ever had to do, but online, they show you how to do it. You get a blender and you get the best, from your mom or something. What about just taking a probiotic? So a probiotic, prebiotic is the high fibers and things that are non-dissolvable that the bacteria will grow on. So that's like, let's see, jicama, dandelion root, garlic, onion, believe it or not, bananas, especially the green bananas, different things like that. You can, if you Google for that, you can see that list. Those are important. And then the probiotics are the actual bacteria that are good. And, you know, you can actually get an analysis of your stool to see how is your diversity. And some people feel like if we will learn more about that, we can maybe put the right probiotics in and help problems like autism, anxiety, depression, things like that. It's a field that's still burgeoning, and we don't know because there's billions of bacteria in there. So we don't really know what the best way is. I remember Zach Bush. Have you ever heard of him? So he's a triple boarded doc, and you would really meld with this guy. He wants to kind of save the planet, but he knows it's not through Washington, D.C. So he wants to have everybody have a natural garden, an organic garden, and get back to eating naturally. But one of the things that he had said before was if you go out into the woods, and you have a waterfall, you should open your mouth and breathe in all that moisture, because it's all laden with little tiny bacteria that are very beneficial, and those will help to colonize your gut. Like if you have an organic apple, you know, right near the stem, there's a little bit of dirt in there. Well, you don't really necessarily have to wash that piece off, you know. I mean, that's what he says. But, you know, because you get a few bacteria in there. Yeah. So, but it's the good ones, you know. So anyway, very interesting. How do you colonize your gut? But, you know, your first gulp of after you are born is from the juices and everything from around your mom. And so your first indoctrination of bacteria is from your mother. So they always say if we ever had a chance, if you totally lost your gut biome, your best bet would be to then be recolonized with bacteria from your mother. Kind of interesting.
I'm not going to ask how to do that.
Well, I think the easiest way would be upstream, not downstream. But anyway. Okay. But it's so important. The gut is so important. I bet you some of your listeners are wondering, well, let's see, my gut, do you have, you know, is it too loose? I don't go enough. What is it like? And, you know, we don't really like to talk about it on air too much, but it's super important. Yeah. And so, like you say, the importance of the pre and probiotics is very important.
And when I was living in Los Angeles, the fad out there was colonics, where they flush out your intestines and suck out all the poop. I've never done it. Is there some validity to that it being beneficial to your health, or is it all just kind of a superficial Hollywood fad?
A friend of mine was going to have one, and I said, why are you going to have it? He says, it makes me feel so good. I said, would you mind if I come and watched? So I did, and it was very unusual. But the lady who does it, there's two certified colonic hydrotherapists here in San Antonio, and she's a super smart lady. She's about my age, and she knows people. And so, you know, first thing, you got to calm the person down a little bit, kind of like rubbing on an alligator, you know, in their belly and stuff to calm them down. But anyway, because you're going to stick a tube in their rear end. But basically, it's a very, very gentle lavage. A little, you know, the water goes in, and then you just kind of push it around, and then she turns a knob, and it flushes it back out. And some people, I think they're not very efficient at getting all of that out, and they do feel much, much better. But we ought to be able to do it naturally. So, you know, if you can't, then a periodic colonic is not a bad idea. And what was really intriguing to me, because when I was just learning about ozone, he says, well, my colon hydrotherapist puts ozone in my rectum. I said, really? I was not aware people did that. But because ozone, if it goes, and there's another way you can do ozone at home, actually, is rectally, and they do it in Cuba a lot. There's a lot of research on it, because it gets absorbed and goes right to your liver. And, you know, your liver handles a bunch of things. So for people who can't really afford to get ozone treatments, different places, there's books online and stuff where you can actually learn how to do that. But yeah, and I haven't had one either.
Okay.
But I think my colon health is okay right now.
When it comes to biohacking, you know, that term is being tossed around quite a bit on how to increase longevity, how to live longer. And I think you mentioned, was it Dave Asprey, who says he wants to live till he's 180 years old. Mm-hmm. With regards to biohacking and nutrition and getting more sleep, do you have any biohacking tips and insight for us?
Well, it sounds like it's really difficult, but I want to keep it simple. I mean, again, to me, the big five is good sleep, good nutrition, regular exercise, detoxify, and de-stress. So good sleep, how do you do it? Think about how you put a baby to bed. So you have a routine. First, you give them some food, you give them a nice bath, you change their diaper, you read them a story, and then you put them to bed in a dark room, and nobody goes in there and bothers them. They certainly do not have a cell phone right there. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of it, or they're not watching TV either. So, you got to kind of get rid of all those things. And I like what you said you do at the end of the evening. You rev down by 3 things that you're thankful for through the day. A prayer is super. Meditation is excellent. There's a lot of different ways to rev your body down like that. One interesting hack, if you can't do it, you can actually use pulsed electromagnetic field. That is a little magnet. And it's, let's see, Dr. Pollock, PAWLUK.com. He sells one called a Flex Pulse, and it has, your brain is moving at a lot of cycles per second. So when you and I are talking and thinking, it's probably 20, 30 cycles per second. That means that's how fast it's going. And when you're in your deep sleep, it's 1 to 3 cycles per second. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If you put this little magnet thing under your pillow, it will entrain your brain and kind of capture it and slowly bring it down. And a lot of people are able to sleep through the night with that. So that's kind of an interesting one.
And what is that called again?
It's called a Flex Pulse, FLEXPLUS. And the website where I bought mine was Dr. Pollock, PAWLUK.com. He's kind of the national guru on pulsed electromagnetic fields. That's a magnet that flashes off and on. So the other thing is melatonin. A lot of people, by age 60, people's melatonin production has dramatically decreased. And melatonin started out as just being an antioxidant. It's been around for 1 million years. Well, the first bacteria did not need to go to sleep. They needed the protection against the oxygen in the environment. So it's an antioxidant first. But as we became multicellular organisms, we needed to tell the body, okay, you can rev down now and clean yourself up for the next day, detoxify and all that stuff. So that's kind of why we have it. And so putting in some melatonin at night slowly to make sure you can tolerate it is a good idea. So that's sleep. Good nutrition, we talked about. Regular exercise, super important. And if you feel like you can't do it, again, we've got some hacks for that where you have the blood flow constriction bands. You can look that up online and you'll find a lot of information, but do something. It doesn't take a whole lot to go for a walk. You see the people who count their steps. You don't need any magical number of steps. Just get out and do something because that drives your mitochondria. Detoxify, there's a lot there. So one of my favorites is a sauna. Do you happen to have one?
Favorite song?
Do you have a sauna?
Oh, a sauna. Nope, I don't.
Okay, so it turns out saunas are super good, and we don't use them hardly over here. I got an article here about sauna increasing longevity. This is a 20-year study out of Finland. Those who used a sauna 4 to 7 times a week for 20 minutes, 50% less likely to die from heart diseases, and they also had a 40% reduction in the risk of all cause of premature death. And it's relaxing. So this is one of my favorite things to tell patients. How would you like to increase your longevity by sitting in a little box? And you can buy these saunas that look like a tent for like $1,000 or so. And you can, say you want to watch a show on TV or watch Coffee with Colin. You can sit in your sauna and do it, and you actually increase your health. It's pretty awesome.
And some of these saunas actually have infrared sensors in there. Are you seeing these now? Where
this is an infrared sauna? Yes.
Okay. Detoxify from the inside out.
Right. Yeah. So it's a near infrared sauna, I believe, and it's let's see. The one that I saw was called the Relax Sauna by Momentum, I think. And if you put in a code Dr. Frank, you get 10% off, which covers the shipping or something like that. Anyway. Okay. But no, I'm not really trying to sell saunas, but any one you want to get is good. And if you have one at home already, please use it because there's a lot of health benefits. Why, in Finland and the Scandinavian countries, that's part of their culture. Every evening they go into the sauna and they live longer. We always wonder why was that, but that's one reason. So other ways to detoxify, again, exercise makes you sweat. Sweat gets rid of all kinds of stuff, and then eating the right things helps you to detoxify, plus good regular bowel movements and stuff like that. And then de-stress, you are good at that one because you've talked a lot about that before, where we have to have meditation, especially, or whatever works for you. Prayer, yoga is fantastic. If you can't seem to get there, some people are kind of locked in a maybe scars from their childhood and different things like that. Another thing that we use in our clinic is called IOSIS Microcurrent Neurofeedback. So it's an interesting thing where you put these little leads on your head, and basically it kind of bathes the brain in those delta waves, like we were talking about. Delta waves. Let's say that you got hit on your head. Your body tries to bathe that area with delta waves and calm it down because it's irritable, and it leaves the rest of the brain kind of wanting. And so you don't have a concerted thinking, right brain, left brain, all that kind of stuff. So what this does is you put, the computer does it, so you don't have to do anything. You put these little things on there's a technician involved, but anyway, and but you put these things on, it takes 20 minutes, and you're more relaxed after that. It's kind of retraining the brain to get out of its non-productive patterns of activity there. So that's another possible way of doing it. But I really, let's keep it simple. You don't have to have a whole lot of tools. You can exercise, you can sleep, and just, if you think about, the hardest part for our country is turning off stuff and just getting back inside of yourself, breathing. I read in your book that, that is a very important piece also. And just kind of getting out in nature sometimes, and just kind of, being one with the universe again, is super important. That we don't do that very often here in this country.
Yeah, it's definitely important to unplug and not be exposed to the blue light before we go to bed, because it makes us feel like it's still daylight out, and keeps us up at night. So it's definitely something that we should be aware of. And lastly, Dr. Mueller, I really appreciate your time here. And we've got so many questions here. I think we're going to have you on again because there's so many amazing questions here. A lot of people talk about ADHD and anxiety. Do you have any recommendations on how to deal with that? I'm sure it has to do with what we've been talking about tonight as far as nutrition and meditation. But what have you found has been helpful for the people that you treat for ADHD and anxiety that are non-pharmaceutical?
The foods are tremendous. You'll see a big difference in kids. I saw it last night with my nephew. My nephew. No, that's my grandson. Anyway, they fed him. I said, "Why is he bouncing off the walls today?" Well, he had extra sugar. And you can see it. Ask any parent, they can see the differences that the foods make. But a lot of the ones, like you mentioned, that we weren't really thinking would cause inflammation of the gut and then the brain is like dairy, for example. So we need to try different foods. That's probably the first one. And then routines are really important. And I think, like you say, teaching the kids to wind down and to calm down. That is an important skill, and we don't teach it as much. Bedtime prayer, bedtime meditation, stuff like that. Those are really, really important.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Mueller, if people want to get a hold of you, if they have questions, do you do any online type of treatments and consulting?
I haven't really. My email is francismillermd@gmail.com. So that's FRANCISMUE. We're German, so it's Mueller, even though we say Miller. So francismillermd@gmail.com. And I'll try to answer questions there. And otherwise, what I was trying to, I think part of the reason that Kim got me on here was she wanted to see if we needed to promote our Ozone clinic. And we're going to try to keep expanding that. It's not just Ozone, it's a lot of these other things. So if you are seeing a conventional doctor and you haven't really gotten the answer to all your questions, or you don't feel like you're top notch, then find a functional medicine doctor in your area, or a holistic doctor. They're called different things, complementary doctors, different things. But the key, it's moving more towards functional medicine. And that's where we're going to find out what's the root cause of the problem and then see how we can fix it.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Mueller, thank you so much for your time, your insight. We really appreciate it. And we'll definitely have to have you back again soon.
I will look forward to it. Thank you, Colin. Thanks for all you do.
All right. Thanks again.
See ya. Okay.
Wow. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch this because Dr. Mueller had so much amazing information here for us. Definitely want to try these Katsu bands, these BFR bands, some books, The Grain Brain, the Pegan Diet. Definitely want to be checking out Dave Asprey's stuff and his Bulletproof Coffee. Yeah, just so much really great information here. And again, it really comes down to implementing a lot of this stuff and integrating it into making it your daily routine. And to help with that, what I'm going to do is we're going to be starting our 10-day challenge here on Wednesday. So this Wednesday, we are going to be doing our 10-day challenge leading up to our Inspire Summit. And in this 10-day challenge, I'm going to be implementing and helping you get started on whatever it is that you feel that you want to start implementing into your health and wellness routine. So whether it is this intermittent fasting, whether it's working out, whether it's implementing more meditation or journaling into your daily routine, each day we're going to be doing something different to help you get started in helping you live your best self life. Because there's a lot of information out there and we all have information at our fingertips. But what really happens, what it comes down to is implementing this information and putting it into practice consistently. Because we may have some willpower for a few days, but willpower only lasts for so long. We really need to implement and have a structure put in place for us to be able to really see the sustainable results. And they've done studies and they've actually shown that it takes about 60 repetitions of something before it becomes a habit. So like 60 tries, 60 sessions of practicing, whether if you're learning how to play the guitar, it's right around that 60 session mark where you really will it'll start to become more of a natural habit for you instead of just something like you feel like you have to be doing and making an effort towards. So to start you on this path towards integrating more of this stuff into it just being a part of what you do on a natural daily basis. Again, we're going to be starting this 10-day challenge. So what we're going to be doing is launching this on Wednesday at my Facebook Live Wednesday morning. And again, if you haven't signed up for the Inspire Summit, I would highly encourage you to do so because we're going to just keep building on the momentum of all of this. And it is all about creating momentum for you to keep building on the progress that you've made each and every day. And a lot of the times it just requires a little bit of support, a little bit of motivation. And that is what is so great about this Inspire community. It really is about us coming together and supporting each other on this amazing journey towards living our best self lives. So join me this Wednesday for the start of our best, or for our Inspire 10-day challenge. And again, our Inspire Summit starts May 23rd. 5 hours of incredible motivational speakers, insight, and then also tonight, I believe Dr. Mueller is going to be joining us in our Patreon post show. So what's going to be great about this is that anyone who is part of our Patreon community, if you'd like to actually jump into a Zoom call with Dr. Mueller and myself after this, we're going to be starting this in about 45 minutes. If you haven't checked out Patreon yet, all you got to do is go to patreon.com/Colin Egglesfield. And there's different tiers that I have in there for you to be able to jump into and become more of a part of this community. But part of what we do is we do a post show with Coffee with Colin, and Dr. Mueller has offered to jump in there and answer more of your questions. So if you'd like to ask Dr. Mueller some more questions, feel free to jump into Patreon, click in there, subscribe to one of the tiers, and we'll see you guys in about 45 minutes. And other than that, have a great beginning to your week. Happy Motivation Monday. Thanks for everyone who showed up here tonight. And thanks for all your continued support. Couldn't do this without you. And life is all about having the support and the community of people who is your tribe to support you on your mission on living your best life. So thanks again for being here tonight. I will see you all next Monday. Take care.